My name is Mårten Rånge, and I recently did a presentation at a place called Schibsted about trauma-free incident management. It's quite an interesting story, in my opinion, about that, because I was just planning to go there and listen to presentations. But on the bus to the conference, I got called by the conference coordinator, which I knew a little bit, and he said, "Well, person got sick. Can you do a presentation?" So I thought, well, I kind of have this presentation. I can run with that, and was kind of nice setting to do it, because if you do a presentation where you like, how can I fail when people, if I fail, well, it's at least better than no presentation at all. So I felt there was very little pressure upon me to do it. So it felt quite good. So I thought maybe this group here, I've been here a few times and listening, could be interested in talking about trauma-free incident management, because that's a topic I personally think is important and most developers are not asking for. So hopefully you think so as well, or not. At least it was free if you don't like it. And some of you want stuff. So, let's see here. So I think an incident management is kind of like something that happens outside the normal business processes, kind of like an exception. So normally what we're doing is that we are sitting here with Jira tickets or whatever we're using, and we're solving issues in kind of a controlled, ordinary fashion. But sometimes we fall out of it, something that demands our immediate attention. We have to react and do something at once that are outside the normal processes. And that for me is kind of incident. And I also think that we always have an incident management process. It's just that most of us, if you don't think about it, has a bad incident management process that makes us take longer than expected to solve it, or feeling worse when we're doing it, and taking longer to return to the normal business processes. And sometimes you have better incident management processes that helps you work more rationally. And what I want to talk about is what I think is a better way of working with incident management rather than not thinking about it. So I've been in a few incidents before, and for me, some of the incidents I experienced before I learned a little bit about incident management could feel like kind of life-shortening destructive if it was quite bad. I felt an enormous pressure, and it almost felt a little bit like, I don't know what these things are called in English, but these things, like if you know what plastic deformation is, these things are kind of strong, but if you just bend them a few times back and forth, they break. And that is plastic deformation. And I kind of felt that happening to me during some of the more bad incidents I've had, that if I do this a few times, my physical health is going to break. And I don't want that, obviously. But I kind of thought that is the way incident has to be. It's just fundamental. It's by its nature extremely destructive. And it can also seem like an enormous weight on your shoulders sometimes. Like I'm here, I have to solve this, and it's so serious, and it's sort of it's up to me to do it. And I might not have any help. What I have is people telling me, you need to solve this very quickly, otherwise we're having a problem. But I feel like I'm not really receiving help. I'm just alone facing. And it can give you this kind of really, really bad stress levels that kind of which kind of, I think, is what kind of breaks you internally somehow. And what I also experience, because I don't think I'm fundamentally a person that has a great stress resistance, whatever you call it, I can get brain freeze when it's too much my brain stops working. And I sometimes you read about these people that are in kind of a very severe crisis, like an air crash, and they should take action, but they might be under such pressure that they don't take action when an action could save their life. And you think, why? That seems stupid. But being in these kind of situations, I kind of realize you have a point where you stop functioning when this stress kind of gets to you. And then there's the feeling that, here we go again. Why are we never improving? Why are we never doing this better? Why are we always firefighting? So in my opinion, I used to think that is the way it had to be, kind of. But I was sort of exposed to incident management process at the place I was working at. And for the first time, I kind of realized it doesn't have to be this way. I think an incident rather now can be a way to learn. Now, when you're working with a system, the system can look perfectly fine, like a smooth, electric car, or I don't know, something really amazing piece of engineering. And then it breaks down. And that is kind of like the strong light that shines through, an X-ray light that shines through your architecture. And it shows you all the shortcuts you've been taking and all mistakes and everything you should have fixed but never did, kind of your technical depth. The incident can sort of expose that. And that if you learn that, catch that, that can also lead to improvements by trying to improve these things. And incident can also build trust. In a team, it can build trust if you've done it properly. So if you have a team and you have a tough incident, but you have a good way to cooperate together, this team after incident might feel, we are now a better team. I know that these are the people I can rely on when it's it's tough. But you can also build trust with customers, because a smart customer knows that if you go to production, if you push things to production, things are happening. Sometimes things go bad. And if you're working in some places in Sweden, if you're working in bank industry, the government that sort of oversees the bank expects incidents to be reported. Because if you don't report incidents, that either shows you're lying or you don't know what the heck you're doing. And so you don't know about the incidents, but you're having them. And nothing of that is good. So, so a smart customer knows incidents happen. But what they want to see is that you work incidents irrationally. And you can improve from it and learn from it and try to avoid performing the same mistake multiple times. But incidents do happen, and that can lead to trust. A little bit of background, and I'm a little bit concerned about giving my background here, because I learned about this at a company called Schibsted. And I'm not sure if you know about the company called Schibsted, but I know that we had a London office for Schibsted. And well, Schibsted had the idea of building this kind of Facebook, enormous sort of, Facebook replacement or whatever, some kind of huge strategy. And they hired a lot of people and had a huge office in London that they, in the end sort of just terminated in maybe not the best fashion. And so the brand Schibsted, I think in London, is kind of ruined. So I cheekily said at the meeting to no laughs that, so let me get this straight. We spent 1 billion NOK on ruining Schibsted's reputation in London, because that's what we got out of it, right? Nobody was laughing at the meeting, but I hope if you feel bad about Schibsted, I still hope you can sort of listen to me and sort of maybe think I'm okay. I don't know, or not. But I was thinking a little bit before this presentation. So I joined a company called Schibsted. Schibsted is a well-known company in Scandinavia because it's a huge concern concern not the right word, but it's a huge organization that owns many newspapers and marketplaces. And they own many major newspapers and they own many major marketplaces inside the entire Scandinavia. And they used to own a lot of marketplaces inside in Europe as well, but they got rid of it. And that was when we lost our London office. And one of the many of these obviously use Google Analytics, but all of the Schibsted assets are using a product called Pulse. And Pulse is a data that collects user behavior. Kind of when you interact with the sites, it collects like what ads are you clicking, what articles are you clicking, how do you navigate through it, and so on and so forth. Kind of like Google Analytics and these kind of things. But it does this as an internal product. And I joined this product. And if you think about Facebook, this is not big data. It's small data. But if you think about many other places I see, what we did was kind of big data. We received approximately 5 terabytes of JSON documents per day. And then we looked at these JSON documents and wrote about 15 terabytes of data to other places. So it was kind of a simple product in that, depending on how JSON object looked, it should go into different buckets. The only problem was for it that we were supposed to sort of run it 5 terabytes of data per day. And it has to run reasonably cost-effective, and it could never be down. It was supposed to run 24/7. So I joined that team a few years ago, and I knew nothing about big data engineering at all. I've been working for a few years, but I knew nothing. And I joined this team of very strong-willed, very, very competent developers in big data engineering. And for various reasons, all senior developers left. And now suddenly I was the senior guy, and people were looking to me as kind of the senior big data engineer. But I'm just senior because I'm the oldest, not really because I'm the most experienced. And one of the things that I kind of was worried about in that situation was coming at the first name basis between first sort of on the Christmas card list of these two people, very scared people. So on the right, because if you're in a lot of security incidents, you get to know the right guy on the left, which is called Ralph Benton, which was the chief information security officer. And if you have a security incident and you have a lot of them, he gets to know you quite well. But the really scary person was the person on the right, and it is Ingvild Ness, and she is the person responsible for implementing a GDPR. And if you have privacy incidents, you get to know her pretty well. So I was concerned about that, of course. I'm joking a little bit here, by the way. But what I'm trying to say here is a roundabout way is because Pulse was kind of sort of a centralized component that everybody was using, I was involved in a lot of incidents, not just because we caused it, but if someone sent us data that they shouldn't send us and we didn't filter it properly, now suddenly we become part of that incident, and we becoming part of that incident management team to sort of resolve it. And then you become friend with, or I don't know, friend, but you get to know Ingvild Ness at least a little bit, because she asks a lot of difficult questions. But we also sometimes screwed up ourselves. So what happened was that because I was kind of a senior developer, I tended to be involved in almost all incidents somehow or another. And so I learned a lot about this incident management process that we're using at Schibsted, and I started to liking it. And I want to tell you a little bit about it. At Schibsted, this process was called IMAS, Incident Management at Schibsted. And I'm pretty sure it's kind of copy-pasted and adapted from maybe Facebook or Google. We had a lot of these engineers there. I don't know. But I learned this as incident management at Schibsted. And this thing here consisted of a few parts, which I think are the important parts. And you can do more, but I think I try to figure out what's the essential bits of it. So the first part, now we're using three letter acronyms because we are developers, right? But the first part is the live incident document, the LID we often talk about. And this, I think, is one of the central pieces of the incident management process. The live incident document is a continuously updated document about what's currently going on and what we're currently doing and what we're thinking the problem is. And one big reason of writing this document is not to figure out who's done it, but the big reason to figure out it is if you're inside an incident that is quite serious, you have a Slack channel maybe, and what happens is that you start working on it, and then your boss joins the Slack channel and says, I want to know what's going on. And then you have to explain to the person what's going on. And then the boss's boss shows up and says, I don't want to know what's going on. Please tell me. And then you have to explain it again, and so on and so forth. And that's not a very good way, because what you want to do is resolve this incident as quickly as possible. So you maintain a live incident document to sort of say, if someone joins the Slack channel and says, I want to know what's going on, then you just say, read the LID. They shouldn't even ask. They should know that this is what they want to do. But if they ask, if they don't think about it, you say, just read the LID and come back if you have things to do, if you have things to add to it. And this is in order to help you as a team to be able to focus on resolving the incident and not just explaining it over and over. But that leads to the responsibility of maintaining the LID, because if the LID is not maintained, your boss will come back and ask what's going on because it doesn't say anything. And I think the primary person who is responsible for maintaining a LID, of course, is a live incident document. Many people are working on it. But there is a person, there are three roles in this. And the first person and most important person is the incident commander. And each incident always has an incident commander, and this person is in charge of the incidents. And this person maintains the live incident document to make sure that people get the calm they need to sort of run it, but also make sure that the team is focused on what's important. And what's important is to mitigate the incident. Now, we're not trying to sort of find the gold-plated solution here. We're trying to make sure the incident gets mitigated enough so we can return to normal business processes. We don't have to find a perfect solution. We just need to make sure that the criticality of it is removed. For example, if you find a person bleeding to death on the street, you stop the bleeding. put the person in the ambulance, and now they're in the hospital, and kind of now you return to normal processes. But you have to stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient enough so you can sort of do that thing. And that is the point of the incident management process, to try to mitigate it, return to normality. Now you will still have tickets that are very high prioritized. They have to fix them soon, but it's normal business processes. An incident commander is there to make sure that you are focused on that and sort of, working towards that thing. An incident always have an incident commander. That is also very important. So that in this process is also important that you have an instant handover process, because what happens is that the first person that discovers the incident is the incident commander implicitly. So for example, when I went out, when I had my COVID shot, I was having corona. No, I didn't have corona, but I got the vaccine shot, flu, whatever it's called. Then I was biking home. And when I was biking home, I almost ran into a black cable that was down on the streets, on the bicycle street. And I didn't know what that was. It could be electrical. I didn't realize, but I thought, what can I do? Well, I called the fire brigade. But I'm the incident commander here. Currently, even though I'm woefully unqualified, at least I'm here. I'm in the right position in the right time. So I'm calling the fire brigade, telling them I have a black cable here on the road. I don't know. Can you send someone? And they say yes, we can. But meanwhile, I was still standing there and trying to sort of. When people came, I said, "Watch out for this cable. You probably shouldn't run into it." And people kind of avoid it. So I tried to sort of do as good as I can while I was waiting for the fire brigade. And then finally the fire brigade came over and they took over, and they are now the incident commander because they are just much better suited for it than me. But the same thing really applies to incidents at work as well. Even though I'm not suited for it, I still can do something. Maybe it's just sending out an email to people saying, we're working on a problem, we're aware of it, we're doing as good as we can. You need to alert someone that can maybe help you escalate it further. And until someone relieved you of being the incident commander, you are the incident commander. But then what happens if I find an incident and then thankfully, and I know nothing, but thankfully, finally, someone shows up that knows something. And then they say, hey, do you want me to help? Do you want me to take the incident commander role? And of course I want that because, I know nothing about this thing. But there's a little bit of handover here, and that is, what I say that to the person, maybe I created this live incident document, say, okay, I need you to go into the live incident document and put your name in the live incident document. And when you're done so, come back to me. They put the name in the live incident document, come back to me and tell me, I did that. And then I check it. And the reason you have this little handshake process is you want to make sure you don't end up with an incident without incident commander. Because what can happen is I think it's taken over and the other person thinks I handle it, and we both go to bed and we have an incident that have no progress because no one is working on it. So there's a little bit of handover there, which is important. Now, what also can typically happen is that for a small incident, you can probably as an incident commander resolve this mostly by yourself. But what can happen with incidents grows a little bit is it gets too much to sort of manage kind of the project management of the incident and also solving the incident. And that's why you have the possibility of adding an operational lead. And what you do then is you have the second role, and that is operational lead. And that is a person that is focused on troubleshooting it and reading logs, trying out hypotheses, but focus on kind of the technical bits in order to mitigate the incidents as possible. And typically you work very close together with this person in order to sort of figure out the problem. And that relieves you as an incident commander to maybe focus more on sort of making sure that people are working on the right thing, updating to the live incident document, negotiating with stakeholders perhaps, kind of project management, but kind of chaotic, sort of high-paced project management that you kind of do when you have a serious incident. But same thing there, you do the same thing, you do handover of the operational leads, you're certain people understand. And then third role is communication lead. And I never, thankfully, I never needed that person, because if it screwed up really, really bad, you might need a press release, or you might need to talk to lawyers, or you might need to talk to police, I don't know. And that might be well outside your competency as a normal developer. And that's why then you need to sort of roll in a communication lead, which sort of can help you out with these very difficult ways to sort of communicate with, public or the board or whatever. But it has this in the role to handle it. And finally, have what is called incident review, which is how you learn from this incident. That you always have the review where you go through, you explain what happened, you explain you explain how you think the reason, and you identify actions you want to take for the future to solve it, to make sure this doesn't happen again. But this action happens part of the normal business processes with Jira tickets or whatever, not as part of the incident. And then, of course, which is often forgotten, is that you thank people for the help. If someone has done an outstanding job, you sort of point it out. And, you know, especially if they're not in your team, someone else might have joined that was the Kafka expert, and that person really, really saved your ass that day. Well, you should thank that person during incident review, for example. So, and another kind of thing here is that I think that everybody should kind of know this process. Obviously, some people know this much better than others. Like if you've been an incident commander a few times, you are probably the expert on this process. But at least everybody should know roughly what the roles are, what the live incident documents are, how you start an incident, and that you shouldn't ask for an explanation when you can read the lid. So that, I think, should not just be the developer, it should be the testers, the product lead, I don't know, and the management. Everybody should be aware of this process of how you deal with it. So in order, I hope, to make this a little bit interesting, I want to give you an example of how I resolved, when I say I mean our team resolved a real incident at Schibsted. I did clear this with the CTO of Schibsted to make sure that I could tell you this story, because even though it's not very, it is a serious incident, but it's not sort of, you know, security or privacy incident, but it was serious. So I wanted to make sure he wasn't sort of upset with it, but he thought this was just a good idea. He is a smart guy. He knows these things happen. Everyone knows that. So I want to tell you about the real incident that happened to me at Schibsted, and how we use this process to resolve it. And maybe you think it's interesting. So this incident started, like every good incident do, with the phrase, what's the worst that can happen? What I was supposed to do at that time, I thought I could, you know, I was the senior guy, but I want to show that I can do stuff. So I think I could pick up a simple ticket on the Jira and do a tag change on our services for observability reasons. So this was Amazon, and we tagged the services in Amazon in order to be able to track their cost in the cost explorer better, to see what is costing money. And our bill was roughly, I don't know, remember, $700,000 a month. So it's good to track the cost to sort of figure out where we can sort of save money. And so this was just something very simple, change the tags of the service. And it required that the service, we created a new cluster with the proper tags, and the old cluster was dying, but we've done it multiple times. And the most scary part is we had to also do it for our front applications, our front web application that was receiving the events, because once it got inside the system, we didn't really lose it. But if this front application went down, we were at risk of losing data, because nobody was listening when the web pages were trying to send events. But we done it. We deployed the service multiple times a day. This was, as far as changes go, really safe. No code changes, just a tag change. What's the worst that can happen? So I talked to the senior guy, Carlos, at that time, saying, you know, let's wait until lunch so everybody's back after lunch, but I'm not expecting any problems here, really. And he said, no, this is going to go fine. What's the worst can happen? So we waited lunch, and I deployed the change, and what noticed immediately was that all the alarms went off, telling me that the traffic has disappeared completely. Now, we received a lot of traffic. I said 5 terabytes a day today, and the point of our system is to receive traffic and distribute traffic. So when we lose traffic, that's kind of we lose the point of our software. You know, what we're doing. So that's bad, right? Immediately go, okay, this was not expected. This is bad. And what we trained in this case is whenever we run into this kind of problem, we just go back to old cluster that was working. We had a cluster that was removed, boot that cluster up again, and kill the malfunctioning one. That didn't work as well. So the old cluster that was working perfectly fine 5 minutes ago no longer works. I was confused. And this is maybe 30 seconds into this incident, and I was already receiving notifications on the Slack channel by people saying, hey, we're not getting this data. Do you know what's going on? So, okay, so I was like, okay, this is bad. And I kind of said, okay, this is a severity 2 incident from our point of view. Severity 1 is like super bad. This is bad. So what is a severity 1 in our case? Well, that is if we leak data, if we leak private information out that we cannot take back. That's super bad. Then I really get problem with ingvilness. But losing data is kind of fine. I mean, it's not fine, you get it, but it's not the end of the world for us in what we were doing. If you're in the bank industry, that can be extremely bad, but for us, it's not the end of the world, but it's super bad still. So severity 2, and I caused the problem by deploying it. I knew the incident process quite well. I felt, I'm the incident commander here, so let's do it. I talked to Carlos and said to Carlos, okay, Carlos, the heat is on. What we thought never could happen, happened. Can you be my operational lead here? Yes, he said, I'm going to do it. And we had delegated the operation lead to Carlos. And we said, okay, what we need to do right now is to mitigate this as soon as possible. So Carlos, I don't care how you do it. Make traffic flow through the system. The hack can be the ugliest thing ever written in the entire life. Just make traffic go again. And when Carlos started looking into this, what I tried to do is I did kind of some product management. I created the live incident document, I created a Slack channel, and I announced it in War Room, and we used automation for this inside Schibsted. And this is very useful to have, but you don't really need it. But the point of this is to make sure the lead is active, there's a Slack channel where we can have communication, and we announce it in the War Room so people can stop bothering me about we're having this issue, because now they see it in the War Room, Pulse is having problems. I can talk to them in Slack and don't have to tell Mårten all the time, because I was getting annoyed by all these messages. So I kind of was doing this, and it takes, it's not so many buttons, but it takes a little bit while, maybe 5 minutes. And as an incident commander, I maintain the lead in order to be able to focus on the incident. So in order to make sure that Carlos and other team can focus on this thing and not explain it, I have a sort of responsibility to make sure it's up to date. So I wrote what I knew, which wasn't much. We have a problem, we lost traffic after a simple tag change. We don't know what, but we're working on it right now. And when I got it done, I returned to Carlos and say, how is it going? How are we doing here? And luckily, Carlos is a good guy, and he worked with another good guy. And they actually found a mitigation. So I was very happy to hear it. And what is that? I said, well, when we went into the cluster nodes, we found that the web server wasn't running. So we thought it crashed somehow on the startup. So we tried to start it, and it started. Okay, that's strange. So it crashed on the startup, but when you started it after the startup, it worked. Yes. Okay, so that meant for us that what we could do is we could go through all the nodes in the cluster, 10 maybe, and start the web server manually. And when we did that, the traffic started returning to normal. So that was a sigh of relief. We kind of have found a way to sort of stop the most severe, get the heart beating at least in the patient, completely brain dead patient. No, not brain dead, but the heart was not beating. Now it's beating again. But what we found is that the symptom we saw where the new cluster have spread to other services. Its symptoms a little bit different, but we see the same thing. New nodes that are being added, the web server don't start. For the new nodes that exist, the web server is running perfectly fine. And when we log into new nodes and try to restart them manually, the web server starts without a problem. We read the log files and we see that during the startup, the web server complains about some very strange files missing. We're very confused about this thing because the files are there, and why should they suddenly go missing? So we are confounded at this point of view, but we at least found the data is flowing in. This is not good enough for us though. So we need to find to sort of stabilize the service a little bit more. So we need to, because what happens in our system, we use what is called load balancing. So the load on pulse goes up and down. And in order not to waste a lot of money during the night or lose traffic during the spikes, it scales automatically up and down. And what will happen if you don't do anything is like, yeah, we started manually now, but then the nodes will be reclaimed. And then when they start it, they will not work. And then we lose data. So we don't want that very fragile situation running. So we want to find a way to sort of stabilize it. And since it had to do with starting the web server and it had to do with JVM somehow, and we had switched from Oracle to OpenJDK a few weeks before, we just thought, what happens if we switch to Oracle JDK? Let's see what happens. It seemed like, well, that shouldn't matter. But it seemed to work. When we switched to Oracle JDK, the web server started as they should. And it seemed to us like it sort of, fixed it, citation mark. But the good thing with this is now we found the incident was put in the status mitigated. So we haven't fixed it, but the bleeding is stopped, the patient is stable, we can transport the patient, so to say, to the hospital without problems. We now can sort of return from this critical state where we are doing nothing else than working on the problem to return to normal business processes. So the incident is mitigated. I immediately got the incident review because this felt still very important for us to work on. So we had an incident review, we went through the timeline, we tried to understand what was going on, we had a lot of ideas, and we sort of created a list of actions, what we sort of want to do to sort of fix this. But we needed to look into this, we felt. And we praised Carlos and others for sort of the good work. So Carlos, as a, sort of our main Linux guy here, got the lead here on investigating this issue. But this was then done during normal team processes, not working overtime. We had mitigated it. It was kind of, we were not, we didn't feel good about it, but it didn't look like it was unstable anymore. So he worked on it for a week or two. I don't really remember. But it was kind of tricky to figure out. But in the end, he figured it out. We learned several important things about our system. Key learnings that we could use to improve it. So the first thing we learned was that we thought we were using immutable infrastructure. So the way our system worked was that when we deployed we created a new version of our software, we created a virtual machine, we installed this, we didn't use Docker, it was before that, or not before that, but we didn't use Docker at the time at least. Maybe they do now, I don't know. We started a virtual machine, we installed all the dependencies, and then we snapshotted the virtual machine. And what happens when we add a new node to a cluster is that it uses the snapshot of the virtual machine to make sure that all nodes in the cluster are identical. All of them are the same. They are immutable infrastructure. We thought it was. But what happened, we learned, is that Amazon has a special service that runs and checks if the dependencies installed needs updating. And if it has something it thinks it needs updating, it will update it for us. So what it found was that the OpenJDK we had on the machine, there was a new update for it, which it installed for us and removed all one. The problem was that our web server just started, and it just partially started before it got through all the dependencies. And what happened was that when it removed all the files, then the web server crashed because it just removed the files of the JVM. And this also explained why it worked because when we went into the machine and started them again, now it used the updated version of JVM. But with immutable infrastructure, this shouldn't happen, but it happened anyway. So we didn't really use immutable infrastructure, even though we thought. So that was a good learning. The fix to this was to make sure that our web server started after the update process, which was a quite big refactor. I'm not a Linux expert, but it was a quite big one because it had to switch between system 5 and system D. I don't remember. The second more important learning was that if our web server had if it crashed and it just tried to start again, we had a little bit loop, like a start web server, crash, sleep, 1 second, start again. We would never even notice this problem. It would have auto-recovered without an issue. It would just crash a few times and then it would start. So we should just change our startup scripts to be a little bit more resilient. And the third very important thing for us was that our health check sucked. So health check was very important in this when we deploy new clusters, because the new cluster is only deployed if the health check is passed. But what happened was the new cluster was deployed and it was broken, but the health check said it's worked. So that's why it allowed the broken version to go live. If the health check was properly implemented, if they had this problem, what would happen is the new cluster would be deployed, all the nodes would go red because the web server is not running, and it would refuse to deploy. I would still be very confused about it, and it would still be hard to fix it, but at least I wouldn't have be in the situation where we had no traffic. So this would still be an incident, but it wouldn't be as serious as it was. So we also fixed the health check. And with that, it's not covered. So when I joined the new company where I work in Contracting Works, I felt we had incidents and no rational way of working them. So I introduced incident management at contracting, which was basically incident management at Schibsted. Now, some people have asked me, like, this incident management process, that's just for big companies, right? We cannot employ this in the smaller companies. Well, Schibsted is a big company, but in Contracting Works, 15 employees, something like that, maybe a little bit more, but it's not a big company. But I still think it makes a lot of sense to have a rational incident management process in place, and we can handle it. I have the same concept. I have the live incident document, but instead of using Google Docs, we use OneNote. Google Docs, OneNote, you need something that is interactive and easy to change, and multiple people can work at the same time. I like Google Docs, but we didn't really use Google Docs at Contracting Works, so I went with OneNote instead, which I think is a reasonable replacement. I have the incident command role, I have the operation lead, I have the communication lead, same thing, and the incident review, very important. And everybody can know the process. Now this, I haven't really succeeded with yet. I think the developers are getting quite good at it, and maybe the testers, the people working test, but the management still doesn't really know how to sort of raise an incident and still like to make a telephone call to key people instead of using the agreed way of using PagerDuty. Anyway, this is a sort of a pedagogical, sort of a learning problem I am facing to make sure that we can sort of make sure that we can raise it not by calling specific people, but having a way to raise it through perhaps PagerDuty, because these people, some people need to go on vacation as well. We don't want a single person to be the one that always takes the incident. This should be a team responsibility. I haven't had time to implement automation, but you don't need it either. What I've done instead is doing checklists. So I have a checklist that says, this is what to do when you start an incident. Automation would be better, but the checklist is good enough for now, for me. So I have on the checklist that tell me how to create a lid, how to create a Slack channel, we use Teams, and how to sort of announce it. And also I'm trying to work to create a kind of blame-free environment, because that, even though I haven't mentioned it, it's kind of important that we have an open and honest discussion, not unfriendly, but honest discussion. And we are people that are junior can tell seniors, I'm thinking you're looking at the wrong problem here. That can be very happen, because you can sometimes lace the focus on a specific issue and you lose track of things around it, when the real problem is actually somewhere else. And we want to have an environment where people can bring in observations, tell them, I'm thinking you're looking at the wrong place. What do you think about this? And because the point is not that I should be right as a senior developer, the point is to mitigate the incident as soon as possible. And if you have an environment where you try to pin blame on people, people will shut up or try to push things away from them in order to protect themselves. And that means we're taking longer time to mitigate the incident. And that's not good for us. And one place they have learned this lesson the hard way is in the aircraft industry. And the cockpit dynamics has changed a lot over the years. In the olden days, it used to be much more hierarchical. The captain was captain, and God himself, it was God, and there was captain, and there was everybody else. And you don't tell the captain what to do. The captain knows best. So there have been situations where they had a small problem with the airplane, and the captain was so focused on this small problem and trying to sort of working with it and talk to a control tower. The first officer noticed the airplane is running out of fuel, but are too afraid to bring it up in such a way that the captain gets it. And what happened in this case was that the first officer tried to bring it up, but didn't dare to speak up frankly enough to get the captain to realize it. And in the end, they ran out of fuel. And suddenly this small incident they had become a huge incident, because they were running out of fuel, and now they have to land an airplane with very little fuel, with no fuel on it. And that's quite hard. you don't want to end up in that situation. So you want to enable people to tell you, I'm thinking you're looking at the wrong thing here. Can you check this thing and tell me if this is right or wrong? And I think that's something we can learn from the aircraft industry. Well, for me, I'm not sure how I'm doing with time here, but for me, this was a very huge improvement for my life as a developer because I'm involved in a lot of incidents. And I think this really helped me. It gives me clear responsibility of what we're supposed to be doing on the different things we're doing in the different roles. It's giving me some structure in the chaos. I don't want a huge manual. We cannot write a huge manual how to do an incident process, but you need some structure, because if you have it all chaotic, then I find I might end up being very stressed, but also inactive. I don't take action. But this small structure gives me a framework to get me to start working on the problem and solving it. It's a way to extract learnings from it, so sort of help you avoid making the same mistake again, or at least reduce the risk of it. And we have a way to handle handoffs between, so we make sure we always work on the problem. We never end up with an incident without the incident commander. It's a way to reduce stress, and we can also focus more on the problem. So for me, this was a very, very big improvement on how I approached incidents. Let me see. So I want to show you a little bit of from my work life. Here I have my live incident template. So this is our lead template, which we have in OneNote. So what typically we do when you have an incident is I copy paste this lead. Of course, I should have automation. That would be much better. I hope you can see the lead, by the way. Dan, can you see it?
Yep.
Yeah. So I have an incident description. I have incident severity. Some people always put the highest. That's wrong. The highest is the company is going to, go bankrupt if it doesn't work out. No, that's very seldom you have it. But B is quite often in my case, because B requires immediate attention. But A is like, yeah, let's hope we never need that. Then you have the incident commander who has that role. Then you have operation lead, you have a communication lead. You have a status, which we continuously update it, telling people that are interested to see what's going on, when was the last update. I have this little thing here to help me doing project management if I'm incident commander, who is doing what, and when did the last check with them. If it's complicated, it might be a lot of people involved, and it's easy to forget what we're supposed to be doing. And people that are looking into things might often be distracted. So it can be quite important for incident commander to, in a friendly way, remind people we need to mitigate the incident. And that's why I have this thing, to make sure that I follow up things that I said I'm supposed to follow. And then I have a to-do list where we are doing things and, and keep track of everything we've done. A list for hypotheses, just putting in things I think could be a problem. Not me, but everybody. And future actions. Things we're not going to do right now, but would be great if we did later. I like everything in the lid. It's all in one place. I put the incident review here as well. So I put in the steps I performed during the incident review, the suggested action, the accepted actions, and then the timeline. Like, it's best if the timeline is created during incident, but it's not always possible. So then I try to recreate it later. And then I have this library of incidents here, you can see here. And that's also quite important, even though I haven't mentioned it, because often things can repeat themselves. So now, since we have this library of incidents, I can search here and try to see, has this happened again? And if I found something that's similar, who worked on the problem? And I can sort of contact that person saying, do you remember this incident that you were working on? What was can you help me now? And to be a little bit more realistic here, this is kind of a silly incident, but this was our training incident where we had to do a demo for Visma. This is more things. I was the incident commander, operation lead, Osmund, and we have a list of sort of prioritized issues. And I mean, it was an incident for us because the system was unstable at the time for doing demos. It was kind of under development. We need to stabilize it, and it was a short time to do it. It kind of was an incident, kind of unusual incident. So, and I think this Osmund, who is the CTO, he felt this process is really useful for him. He's become a big proponent of this thing here, and he's been running many incidents since then. I told you I have checklists. So better automation, but in the meantime, I have a checklist that tells me how to create an instance. And then a final thing which I haven't talked about, but I also have a service registry with different people that who knows something about this thing here. I have some names that I can talk to, and under here, but I don't going to show you, we have some specific instructions when things happen. So that is kind of our IMAC area in our company. So some of you, I hope at least someone of all are interested in it. So I prepared a little tiny URL here. If you go to this link, you can find the live lead template here in Google Docs, and everybody should have access here, I hope. Otherwise, you have to ask me. So here it's the same thing, really. And in case you're interested, you can see my idea of how a lead can look. It doesn't have to look exactly this way, but this is my suggestion. And I'm at the last slide now. So I hope you thought it was at least a little bit interesting. And if anyone has any questions, I'm ready to take them. Oh.
I found it interesting that Tom said in the chat that they use Azure DevOps for, and it's very, very similar to what you did, like a customized work item template. I found that quite interesting. But yeah, that was really interesting. I like the idea of like a talk being a war story, and the story you told about an incident that you've actually has happened in the past.
I hope it made it more interesting and
yeah, definitely. Well, I was actually thinking that would make, because for .NET Oxford sometimes we do lightning talk events, so like we'd have like an event with lots of smaller 10-minute talks, for example, and that would make a really nice theme, because we've all got these stories, haven't we? And a really nice theme where every lightning talk is someone telling a story. Obviously, they'd have to check if they're allowed to with the boss, like you did, but it's just quite interesting hearing people's war stories, because yeah, as I say, we've all got them, so it's kind of, it's nice to know that it's not just me.
No, I think every developer that worked with a while had one, and it's interesting. Someone mentioned I use Datadog for incident tracking. I use Datadog, but I haven't checked the Datadog for incident, and I maybe should do it. We use a lot of Datadog for metrics and alarms. Often, a Datadog can be the starting point of an incident in my world. Because we use a lot of Datadog to observe our system and to have alarms. See some good questions. We are Azure for calling all incidents similar to this template. Yes, maybe I should look into Azure DevOps as well. I haven't done that, so it could be better. I'm not sure. Yeah, Rasmus Hansen. Yes, thank you. I care quite much about this problem. So since I'm not overly worked on this thing, you can check with me as well if you want to have some feedback on what you're thinking about, if you think that's valuable. So I'm up for that.
Rasmus, your question about when this is up on YouTube, it'll probably, when I get a chance, and this week's quite busy, but it'd be within a week, that kind of thing. I don't edit these very heavily, so it's just chopping out the first bits and like the end. So yeah, it won't take long. It'll be some point this week.
Yes, I agree there that it's very important clear who is the incident commander, and also what is the incident commander. It makes it easy if the incident commander knows what the role is, so to say. To sort of help the person, have the team focus on it. And I think I'm just brainstorming a little bit here. I think a good way to learn this process is to do a role-playing session. And this is how I learned the first time. And we had a guy coming in, that a very good guy, now the CEO of Visma, I think, no, Schibsted. And he played the role-playing scenario with us, and he said, okay, we see a problem in the logs. Mårten, what are you doing? And we played out the scenario, and he was kind of, the role, the game master. And I could say, okay, I'm bringing in Carlos. Carlos, can you be the operation lead? I do the incident commander, and we try to play this thing. And we was trying to do all the steps here. And I thought that was a good way to sort of train it the first time. The second time, what we did was we took an incident that we felt wasn't really that serious. Maybe we don't have to run the process, but that's why we thought it was a good training incident. So when it really kicks off, so to say, then we are more, because if we have to do the incident, we have to learn the incident process at the same time having panic mode of really serious incident, that might not be the best point. So we kind of start with role-playing, a simple incident, and then we got into it, and then we became better and better at running incidents, more and more serious ones. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it does. I like your points about the blame-free as well culture, because I think that's so important, because as you say, if someone's scared to actually own up to something, then the incident can get a lot worse.
Yeah.
So I do like that.
Yeah, if you ask the question, did anyone deploy anything? And nobody says something, but someone did, but they don't dare saying it. And then you spend 3 hours extra on that. That's unnecessary.
Did anyone forget to put the where clause on that delete statement? Sorry.
I switched. I switched what's called unequal, the left to the right. One case, it wasn't a very good result either.
Oh dear.
Did I have something? I also think I noticed. Then this was before we got used to it. My team felt it was embarrassing I felt pushback in the beginning, saying, no, we shouldn't declare an incident because it's embarrassing, kind of, to tell the world we have a problem. Let's try to solve it, and people don't notice. I think you might feel that way, but it's the opposite of what you should feel. Just be honest, be open about what you're doing, and I think people will respect you more from your openness, at least if you have a good environment. And someone asked me at Svetug, but what happens if you're in a toxic environment? Well, that's a very hard question. And unfortunately, I think this process might not work then, because it kind of relies on an environment where people can't dare to say how it is, and you have a trust. So then, yeah.
I think if you're in a toxic environment, that's not the only reason you want to be leaving.
No.
Find another job. There's so many jobs out there. Yeah, I've worked with some companies where I've not been happy there, and the best things I've done is when I've moved away. So I should have done it sooner. And yeah,
that can be harder to fix than the hardest incidents.
Exactly.
I like Steve Ardalis's statement. He said, "Change your organization, or alternatively, change your organization."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dan, do you have any thoughts? Because I sometimes ask the host directly.
So you asked just as I was playing a cough. Any thoughts? I like the well, in fact, Tom's also said it in the chat about like your comment about the mock incidents and just having some role play kind of things. And it's kind of it's like it in my current main contract. We're currently we've currently got quite a new infrastructure where we're using Kubernetes quite heavily, and half the team know Kubernetes well, half the team don't know it at all. And there's the whole, and we're introducing, like you've mentioned quite a few times, about observability, so that kind of thing. So we're using open telemetry, and we're introducing like a lot of more, well, I don't want to say modern, because it's not that modern actually, but things like Grafana, Prometheus, all this kind of telemetry stuff. And where a lot, as I say, half of the team are quite okay with that kind of thing, half of the team aren't. And having some kind of role play scenario where people can safely actually try and solve a problem where they're not really stressed about it, and they can jump into and look at the Kubernetes logs, or look on Grafana dashboards and try and work out what's going on. I just think it just, I don't want to say gamifies it, but it makes it a bit more fun. There's not the pressure of, oh my goodness, production's gone down, but it's kind of you actually having to solve a problem and work it out. I like it.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. I think instant, I also think, can be an opportunity to learn how your system works. That has happened sometimes to me, that I barely knew how a system works, and that system stopped working. And then after the incident, I kind of knew a little bit more, at least. That's not the optimal way to learn things, but we kind of have to learn things very fast sometimes because of that.
So if you want to learn more, just have more incidents.
Yeah, more. Yeah. But, yeah.
Magic.
Shall I? I'm not sure if people are interested, but I can put this in the chat, perhaps. It's very simple to type, but just in case someone wants it.
Cool. I can include that in the when I do the .NET Oxford page with like the video and notes. I don't want to say show notes, meetup notes, whatever you call them. I can include it there as well.
Yeah. And as mentioned, this is a topic I care about, so I'm open for questions and messages and these kind of things. I want developers and everybody, customers as well, to feel less stressed over this thing. It's not good to be too stressed about this. So I think this is an important thing that I want to help people with. Let's see.
If I may, I have a question. Do you have any kind of statistical evidence that you are either getting better at handling the incidents or maybe even nicer, somehow generating fewer of them? Because that's one of the things, exactly as you said, with the airline industry. It's not true to say we never have air crashes anymore, but we have very few, precisely because they're so open about it.
Do I have any statistical evidence? I'm not sure I have that. I think you might even see an increase sometimes in incidents, but the instances are more that you are reporting more incidents, because what I found with this process is that I kind of like this process as a way to work with things that I need to coordinate it. So actually, you tend to declare smaller and smaller instances for smaller and smaller subjects, but they are not as serious, obviously, then, right? But then, so after a while, I noticed maybe it goes up a little bit. But I think, I don't really, when you say evidence, that's a tough one, right?
I'm sorry, perhaps I'm being over cruel and even asking about that. But
I haven't collected
metrics. We do this to try and improve. So,
but I can just anecdotically say that I think the team over a while thinks incidents are kind of not as dramatic to deal with, and you are working on them anecdotically again more efficiently, and it feels better to you. And this is not evidence maybe you're looking for, but it would be interesting to see a study, right? If maybe someone at Schibsted, I can maybe ask my CTO about that, because they have been running a lot of incidents, right? On sort of a team. I just look at it from a team level. So maybe I can check if the CTO has some data on that, because that would be interesting to see. Does it get better, at least? But I could try to do that. Let's see, I should write it down. Because it is a good question. What do you say? Evidence of improvements.
Yes, either evidence of fewer, or that they are, evidence of improvements. Improvements is a nice word because it hides hides what kind of improvement you might be looking for. Yeah, fewer or less severe.
Yeah.
Are you genuinely getting better? Why we do these things?
Yes. That's a good question. Yes, let me check with him. He might know. Let me see. Al-Hadi asked the question here. On declaring incident, at what point you declare it to customers? Because sometimes you do not need to get them panic if you think it's solved quickly. Well, I mean, if the customer is impacted in a way that is meaningful for them, I would tell them. So if it is like, this service went down for a few minutes and it's not in a SLA, or doesn't hit, could be good if you have SLAs, right? You have service level agreements, and you are kind of failing those service level agreements. Then I think it's your responsibility to notify them because you have failed that towards your customer. But if you're not having service level agreements or you're not hitting them, but it still impacted the customer in a way that is meaningful for them, I would tell them about it. But maybe not during the incident, or it depends. It really depends here. It's a gut feeling reaction for me at least. But if you have SLA, it's quite simple. Service level objective.
Thank you.
I don't know if they helped you, Al-Hadi.
Thank you. It's just a good idea. Exactly. Sometimes because you need to let them know in advance, even though like probably you think that you are working on them.
Yes.
If something goes like really badly, so you are on the safe side that they can take their own precautions as well.
So, for example, in my current workplace, what can happen? We do a lot of integrations towards ERP systems, and they can be a little bit finicky. So sometimes we might have a problem with one of the integrations, and it might just be stuck. And it might not be very serious, but then I say, okay, this is going to be stuck for maybe an hour or two. It's probably not the end of the world, but let's just tell them. So, because often it's better, you get more confidence or trust from a customer if you approach them telling them, we're having a problem with your integration, we're working on it, but it's currently down. Then if they contact support and tell them, this is not working, so they detect the problem. So I probably have a quite low bar to tell customer if you have a problem. But I don't want to panic them, right? I want to tell them, well, you have an issue, we are working on it, and we will give you more information when we know more.
Okay, thank you.
It would certainly give me a lot more confidence if I was paying for a service and before I even knew it had gone down, they contacted me saying, oh, we know about it, we're on it. If I kind of like found it had gone down and they didn't know about it and I was telling them, then that's, I don't know.
And that is one of the reasons for me, and this is a secondary thing why I care so much about observability as well, because I want to detect things before my customers detect them. And hopefully we fix them before they even notice. But if they don't fix, at least we approach them saying, we have a problem, we're working on it, we are in control, we give you an update later. Good questions, thank you.
I quite like, I think we skipped it before, Richard Jonas mentioned a bit earlier, saying that as well as the blame-free environment, it should be safe to say, I don't know, rather than guess, and how sure you are about something you say. So that's a good point. It's kind of, it's important to be able to say, I don't know, rather than like bluff it and make mistakes because you're pretending you know something you don't.
And it should be okay for the senior developers saying, I don't know this thing. This is not a service I know. You don't, so you don't feel pressured to know all the stuff just because you work for 20 years. I don't know everything. So all any tools beside OneNote you would recommend to handle incident. So I think the important properties, which I think OneNote has, even though OneNote is starting the age of it, is that we can be multiple people working in a document at the same time. And I don't have it's very kind of simple just to write it, and it just resolves these conflicts for you more or less automatically. Now, I personally think that the Google Docs works better for me, and maybe even Word works better these days. But the important thing is it should be very simple to do changes collaboratively, so you can work together. That is my big thing. If that makes sense, who wrote the OneNote thing there, Rasmus.
I'm just like, I must have somehow missed this Google Wave that Tom's just mentioned. What's Google Wave?
Quite a few years ago, I think.
Did you really never see that? It was one of the most short-lived Google products, which isn't saying very much for Google products these days. But yeah, it was like a weird kind of cross between a chat and a wiki, and it was just mad. You like every part of it, anyone could edit it, so you could sort of have a conversation and then edit what other people put and rearrange things. It was Yeah, look it up on YouTube. It's quite fun.
I'm on it now. Well, I'm looking at screenshots of it as well. Oh, I don't know how I missed that one.
I think it was only around for about a year, maybe if that.
So yeah, I'm still open for questions, but it kind of seem currently at least we don't have much more. So we might have, from my point of view, hit the end here. I hope you thought it was interesting, and you at least something you could take away from it, because I think this presentation is kind of the presentation that developers don't ask for, but in my humble opinion, some might at least need to hear it.
No, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, it's been, as I said before, just hearing war stories and this kind of thing, I find it's really interesting. So thank you. So,
yes,
fantastic talk.
No problem. My pleasure.
Thank you.
And also a way for me to give back to this community a little bit. I've been in some presentations. So.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
And for everyone, well, don't worry about you, Mårten, but because I know you, I've got your contact details, but all the other prize